Welcome, folks. I'm the Captain, Ross Memphis Pambrun, and with me, as always, my friend, the President, Lawrence Gervais. We're broadcasting from Calgary in Region 3 of the Métis Nation of Alberta, which is part of the historic Métis Nation homeland. We would also like to acknowledge these lands are the traditional territories of the Blackfoot Confederacy, the Siksika, the Kainai, the Piikani, Tsuut'ina, and Stoney Nakoda, with whom we share this land on the basis of our historical and ongoing relationships. We would also like to say thank you to our First Nation friends, to the Métis settlements, and to our Métis brothers and sisters and families. We would also like to give thanks to our elders for their guidance, to Mother Earth for the time she allows us to be here and share her bounty. And now, folks, let's get the wheel squeaking. Welcome, folks, to the Squeaky Wheel. With me, as always, my very good friend, the co-host, the President of Region 3, the historic Métis Nation homeland in southern Alberta, is Lawrence Gervais. And hi, folks, as you've heard us many times before, I'm Ross Memphis Pambrun, the Captain, and we're here to bring you conversation from a Métis perspective. So always appreciate it. Appreciate all of our listeners. Thank you for those who make sure they take that little extra time to click the red button that says subscribe. All of that is a great reflection of us. I'm coming to you from my new office. So folks, I'm still getting a little bit used to it. I'm still trying to figure it out. There's a lot of additions that have to be made. So I appreciate your patience. For those of you who are just listening, it's stark is what it feels like. For those of you who get to see it, though there's a few guitars that are finally starting to hang here, it does still just feel a little bit stark. So Lawrence, welcome again, as always, to our sort of weekly conversation. Give us a little update, because we got a lot of topics we want to just jump through today.
Yeah, I think the first one is, we wrapped up our Métis fashion show. Been a wonderful program for all 11 participants across the homeland. I got a few accolades from some of the members of the group thanking me for opening it across the other provinces, which is a very good thing, I think. But I wanted to actually, look at the larger pool of Métis artists out there and see who can actually contribute to, their garments. And, the capotes worked out very, very well.
And as I'm sure a lot of our listeners know, I participated. At first, I think there was a bit of, we didn't see the numbers jumping on. So I threw in an idea that ended up being a bit of a stage jacket, which didn't end up being what I handed in at all. So I'm really excited that people get a chance in the coming future here to see what a lot of the beautiful products were. I think what happened, and even for me, the fact that we're on our podcast every week, learning or understanding, and not to say it was overwhelming, but what exactly a capote is. And then all of a sudden, and now you just got to make a capote. Oh, and you just have to find the time. It was a lot of work.
Yeah, absolutely.
In the conversation that I had with the other artists, I really brought forward the fact that it was delightful to learn for me how to blanket stitch and why blanket stitching was important. And coming up with the idea and the design. And there are some amazing artists out there. I like to think that what I designed, for lack of a better term, let's say had a little bit of character to it, very untraditional. But what I saw out there for people's artistic integrity, their energy, their what they were bringing with the representation of family and culture, phenomenal.
Yeah, absolutely. And I didn't even know they were called capotes or capotes, or, there was different words for it, different meanings. I've always heard capotes. And growing up, as a Métis person, we never really identified with capotes or even flags or sashes. We just knew we were Métis. That sort of understanding came a little later. I'm 48 years old. I think a lot of people my age kind of went through that, but I always knew I was different. But yeah, it was a very unique project, having these 350-year anniversary blankets from Hudson's Bay Company that Parks Canada purchased, and just said, here, go ahead and design it. And Region 3 will, purchase the designs later on and host them at different events. So we're pretty excited. We're just hoping that we can actually meet in person one day and actually see them in person. And we're pretty excited.
Yeah, I think that you're absolutely right. Every one of us is all waiting for the opportunity to get together, which I know we have a few other very specific Métis things that we want to talk about. maybe we're getting one step closer when considering in Barcelona, they recently had a concert that they sold tickets for 5,000 people. And they're doing it as a little bit of a test of how the variants or monitoring or coming up with of strategies to try and move forward. But with your ticket, you received a mask, a point of care 15-minute test, as well as your ticket. And the goal was of the first 2,500 people that were tested, 2 tested positive and 1 had a exposure. So they weren't allowed to go. They were refunded their money, but the other, at that time, 2,400 were on their way in for a 5,000 person rock concert. And though you had to wear your mask the whole time, it was, you look at the pictures, seems like it moved forward in a really positive way. Everybody loved getting back to reconnecting, and guaranteed the artists on stage were happy.
Well, that's great. But Barcelona's a little too far for our Métis community to go meet. But wouldn't that be nice if Ross paid for us all to go over there?
Yeah. So that's not. So can we start telling everybody that the fashion show will not be in Barcelona?
Well, oh, you just let us down. Yeah. Okay. I guess we got to wait till it's at the Lougheed House or something.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Which is nice as well. I absolutely love the Lougheed House, and they do a spectacular job, and they've been very generous. And I love that their Métis flag is hanging there and waving in the breeze. We're very lucky. Yes. Maybe that is where it'll be.
Yeah. The other thing I wanted to comment on today is also about the vaccine clinics. I know we're kind of jumping around in the conversation. We're pretty excited about Edmonton having theirs. Now Calgary will be next. That'll be in my sort of venue. The good thing about having it at the regional office is Region 3 covers 3 out of the 4 zones for Alberta Health. So we can actually get quite a bit of substantial support from them down here just with one clinic. So we're also encouraging people to go to the Aboriginal Friendship Center in Calgary because they got the ongoing clinic, the one that keep going in different stages as it goes along. But Shane Gauthier runs a incredible clinic over there with the help of Sixica also. So yeah, it's a very good clinic that they're doing. And then ours will be M&A specific. I think the next age group will be 35 plus. We're hoping, crossing our fingers, it'll be open to that age group when we open ours at the end of April.
Well, and I know Regan, the director of medical health for the Métis Nation, put a lot of effort. I know there isn't a day that goes by that she's not in a conversation about what's happening. Just like, the very polite, generous Dina Hinshaw, who you have conversation with, that the work that's been done to start the Edmonton clinic was the groundwork being laid so that we would have the same success here in Calgary. But there's different unique challenges when it comes to where you're going to host it, the available healthcare professionals that can be a part of the monitoring, the rollout, the supplying the vaccine, and ensuring that everybody's monitored afterwards. So I think there is a lot of excitement. Anybody you talk to there's almost a badge of honor, a pride when you get your vaccine. And I know we've had this conversation. I got mine.
Yeah. And that's part of it. I mean, it's always that peace of mind thing, moving forward. Now the doorway just kind of creaks a little bit more open now to see your family. And that's the most important thing. And heading into the summer, it'll be fantastic if you get, the second shot and you're more protected and all those great, wonderful things. Right. So it was a good thing that they went to vaccinate the older folks now. Because by the time, spring is hitting now, they're going to be getting their second shot and they're going to be more comfortable when the summer comes around.
Yeah, and like I've commented before, these clinics are helping us get those numbers up. There's always those people out there who are going to be anti-vaxxers and who fight everything. For the people who are getting the vaccine, they're doing their part. Sadly, those people who have, gotten COVID and struggled through it and, built up antibodies, they're part of the herd immunity. And then we also have, as we get our numbers higher for that protection, we will start to see things opening up.
Yeah, and Regan had let me know that around 80% mark of people getting vaccinated or immune, that's when doors will open up a little more wider and will it be a lot more safer, right? But right now we're only at 13%. I checked yesterday of Alberta having the vaccination, so we got a long ways to go. And then of course getting to the young people, getting in their heads too that it's not Mardi Gras now. It's you still got to be careful out there.
And you look at some of the local restaurants that had big outbreaks just recently, right? So we see the variant and the variant how at risk it puts our family members. It puts our economy at risk when all of a sudden that place has to shut down and it ends up being identified as a location, and now you start your quarantining.
That's right.
Yeah. The one of the things I know we've had a conversation about, and before I jump into, I'd like to have a conversation about William Shatner and Star Trek, and maybe I'll bring it up because it's going to lead into our conversation, and that conversation is going to be identity. Now, before I throw the M word in front of it, I wanted to throw in the William Shatner in front of Star Trek, and he's turning 90. He's working on a movie right now, and there is actually a term for it when you're 90 years old. I think it's non-nable, something. But as an actor, he still loves the journey, but he constantly gets the question of, hey, you were Captain Kirk. And he said he's never watched those episodes that he was in, never watched the movies, with the exception of, I think it was movie number 5, because he directed it. He said he was almost embarrassed for himself for the way he was as an actor, which we all love. I absolutely love it. And it took a long time for both him and Leonard Nimoy, who denied that's who they were as characters. They weren't those people. They weren't until finally they said, this is who we are. Spock used to have a book, Leonard Nimoy, that was I'm Not Spock, until one day it was I Am Spock. He understood his relationship with the community. He understood his relationship with his fans, with his peers. He embraced it. And William Shatner learned to embrace it. Just couldn't look back at a lot of his old stuff. But identity. Now let's throw the M word in front of it. Métis identity.
Well, I mean, God, talking about identity and all that stuff. I mean, Harrison Ford doesn't even acknowledge Star Wars probably as much as the other ones either, right?
Yeah.
But I think William Shatner is a cowboy. He lives in Texas and he races horses all the time, still to this day. And he's 90 years old and he's still winning down there, right? Which is pretty amazing. I was watching the rodeo channel and there was a whole thing on Shatner.
Yeah.
With his horses and he's racing around the arena, right? So, and I think there's that going on with him. But when it comes to denial of who we are, well, that generation, and I understand that a lot of them did that to protect their children, because back in the 60s and in the 70s or throughout, if you go all the way back to the 30s, when residential school was happening, yes, in order to protect your children, you had to identify with something else. So if it was French, English, or Scottish, that's who you were. That was it, as Métis. But nowadays, it's turning a different spell because we're getting more recognition from governments. We're getting more programs. We're getting more money to get to our citizens. And now you have a lot of cousins and sisters and brothers that are starting to identify now. And what does that actually mean? Because, we're all on different levels of Métis identity. And, me having both parents and growing up in it, and like I said, it was just those symbols around us that we never really identified, but we also knew we were different. And going to somebody who's just getting their membership now in order to go to school. And what does that mean to be Métis, right? there's a lot of Métis organizations out there currently that are very hardened about, Métis identity, that if you don't grow up in it, well, then who are you? You're a new Métis. We should just maybe push you aside a little bit, right? Instead of opening the door to allow them to come and, identify with themselves. And I think what's more important is that we have that open door system. Not everyone is going to be an old Métis or grow up that way, but we need to open that door for that new Métis to come in, to educate them, because they are members. They have their cards, right? And I'm not speaking about Eastern Métis or those other ones out there that don't have their membership. I'm speaking about the ones who are brand new coming into the nation. We need to open our doors. We need to present more culture to them so then they can pass it on to the next generation and be proud of who they are.
And I think as we have this conversation and we differentiate, we look at, this is not necessarily the conversation of if you're Eastern and how did, Eastern, and you head south and you have the Creole and you have the that relationship with Eastern Canada. We're talking about people as they continue to accept and or recognize identity.
Yeah.
So,
well, the thing is, one of the membership, and some of them are, according to Pali, is always that recognition from the Métis Nation in order to get your membership. Well, you provide your family tree, you provide a lot of these, possibly a letter explaining why you want to go into the nation, and then us as M&A people or a registry will sort of decipher that information and go, yeah, you're a Métis, right? But once you get your card, it's really the responsibility of that person getting the card on what they do, on what their actions are. So if they're not open to the idea of Métis culture or that sort of family life stuff, well, then that's to each his own. But if you walk into a room and say, yes, I'm Métis, and be proud of it, well, then you have to come into that room with a little bit of understanding of what that is, right? And, I don't even want to call them Eastern Métis because they're really Eastern mixed blood people. They're not Métis people as recognition from us and also the government's recognition. They don't follow that checklist. But they are trying to get into the nation. They identify as mixed blood. They say, my parents are Métis, I'm Métis. Then that's when it becomes like, well, no, your family, your lineage, your ancestry does not match the same as mine from the Red River origin, right? So that's where it becomes like convoluted. And they fight it in court. In Quebec, they had about 14 court cases so they can come into the Métis Nation. And each one of them was denied, right? And I think more and more groups are starting to develop on that side. And, what people have to realize is that we never crossed that Great Lake Divide. That Great Lake Divide was there for a reason, and the Red River people never went into that far into Ontario, Quebec, and Nova Scotia and them, right? We always just sat here, and then we moved westward towards the foothills, where we are now.
Well, and, if you, I guess in our conversation, then if you look at the fact that the courts have laid out some of the allowance, I guess, to say that you are Métis, whereas culturally, and that maybe that subscribes to the fact that culturally we look and say, here where we are when it was the Red River time, and we went west. Mm-hmm. And if you were part of that and you moved, your family has history and you moved west, if you're willing if you want to say, I'm Métis, if you're still exploring it, you still need to figure it out for yourself. But if you want to say that, then it's time to learn. It's time to recognize and accept. I wouldn't necessarily say that my understanding of all aspect of Métis is the strongest, but I'm always willing to learn. And I'm willing to ask questions and say, well, I don't know how or why things may have ended up that way. But if I don't ask the question, how do I stay involved?
Yeah. But I mean, Pambrun and what's the other name that you have? Your dad's original name.
Delerond.
Yeah, Delarons. I mean, they're very significant Métis names in the Red River, right?
Right.
In fact, there's some history books that I've read in the Red River during Riel's time that outlined there was a Pambruns involved in a lot of the negotiations, right?
Mm-hmm.
But if you go right across and cross those Great Lakes and you're in that area, well, it doesn't necessarily mean that they're not indigenous, because they are, but they're just not part of the Métis Nation, the historic Métis Nation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And unless there's something to change, then we should be building on the foundation that we have a strong familiarity with. Yeah. And that's the West here. So
yeah. And also, it blends it a little bit into the northern states, and Sault Ste. Marie is a part of that historic nation, and then of course Northwest Territories, northern BC, those type of areas, right?
Well, and there's always a bit of crossover where you have First Nations, sort of the starting part of one of the starting blocks, and within that family, there's a lot of cultural relationship on the First Nation side. You start to go north, where's that cultural relation side when it comes to the Inuit? Again, we know how people moved around. I think it should be, as we get older and we try and work to create that awareness for youth, and the elders share that conversation, there's every bit of value in understanding your own identity and coming to terms, which means accepting it.
Yes, for sure. And knowing that our people, we were dispersed from the Red River on two separate occasions. We were dispersed from Saskatchewan. Where did we end up? And a lot of us live in the cities. We live in these towns, and we're not confined to a reserve, so we're not part of that system. There's some Métis that are, for sure. Yeah. I mean, I have first cousins that were raised on the First Nation, but it's just who we are as an identity. But we're very urbanized, and we kind of blend in.
It's easy to try and play the game. Oh, what may have happened back then? I always tend to think that we need to continue to move forward, but we do recognize the fact that where the First Nations worked, with the government, or maybe didn't necessarily always work with them, or vice versa, and ended up on reserves. That didn't seem to happen for the Métis, though there was conversation that seemed like, well, if we're going to provide land for all of these Métis citizens, instead of putting them all in one area and calling it a sort of a Métis reserve, we're just going to start sending them all over the place. Here's your land, here's your land. And it didn't provide for the same allowance for cohesion at the time.
Yeah, well, the road allowance system, so, the 25-meter ditches, to the fence line to the highway was the only place we could reside. That was Crown land, right?
Right.
And if they wanted us to move, then they moved you.
Yeah.
Well, that system went on until 1970, and that's not that long ago.
No, that's not. And isn't it interesting that, and people just did. Well, this was Crown land. You were told to move. At what point, how long do you have to be on it before you get to say, this is my land? This is, right?
Well, we go all the way back to the scrip system, right? I mean, Métis had land for generations, and when Canada encroached and they moved in, they made you reapply for that land. They had a system, but it was all about taking that land title away from the Métis.
Right.
So the percentage was extremely high for the government to say, no, you didn't pass this application. And they made it very, very bureaucratic.
Yeah, and isn't that a shame that it always ends up being the bureaucracy that gets involved and then ends up separating families.
Yeah,
right?
because the Métis Nation calls it the biggest land swindle in history, in Canadian history.
Yeah,
was the scrip system, right?
Yeah, the scrip system, because here you've got your land, and here your value. It's just a piece of paper, and somebody says, "Well, I'll give you enough money to survive this winter, and maybe even next for that piece of paper. It's just land. There's lots more of it." and then in the end, you don't own it. Somebody else does. And
Yeah.
someday there will be a lot more conversation around who did own that land at one time. And we talk all the time, you and I, about, well, there's areas that were Métis settlement family areas, and now there's a lot of big Calgary buildings built on it.
Yeah,
well,
exactly.
If we look back,
what does
who
that
owns
mean?
it?
Yeah, we're not going to be kicking people off the land and say, this is Métis, you need to leave, right?
Yeah.
Well, our real direction is going towards government, so they understand it. Métis Nation Accord that we signed with Canada and the Prime Minister was all about, and there's actually inclusion specific to talk about script and what had happened there.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that's coming down the road. May not be next year, but it's definitely has to be addressed by Canada.
Oh, there's no doubt.
Yeah.
And if I don't want to say maybe it puts it to rest, but it honors the loss that a lot of families had experienced.
Yeah.
A lot of time has gone by, so a lot of the hurt feelings may, have gone by, but that doesn't suggest that our government was never responsible and shouldn't take some accountability for the fact that land was handed over, land was taken away, land was moved, land was shifted, and the consequence is families are affected by that.
Yeah. I mean, there's a story in my family where, one of my ancestors was a day late getting script application in, and the land was gone that he had for generations.
Yeah. And for some reason, when the government owes you money, well, it really doesn't matter. It'll take time and you'll get it when they want to give it to you. But if you're a day late on anything, that doesn't seem right. It doesn't change the argument that that individual still has the right, as far as I'm concerned. Yeah. Which, when you think about right and you think about monarchy and that conversation and the struggles, we could banter colonialism and we could banter about the role of the monarchs. The what was in the news today was Prince William was the sexiest bald man alive, much to the chagrin of The Rock and the delightful Stanley Tucci as an actor, or both of them, I guess, as actors, saying, well, I think in somewhat good jest, how is he get ranked higher than they do?
Well, The Rock probably works out 5 hours a day, I'm sure, and probably eats clean and all that. Doesn't drink, and then all of a sudden, Prince William moves in.
I don't know. I wasn't on the judging panel. I don't probably profess that I should be, but it was just one more of those. Does some of this happen just because they're trying to bring the royal family into more conversation, or try and keep the stress of Harry and Meghan? Is that maybe what they're still trying to keep engaged?
Do we still call him Prince Harry? I mean, I'm just going to call him Harry now.
I think we probably should just call him Harry, because though to all the monarchists out there, folks, when you listen to our podcast, thank you. Always send us your messages to tsw@métis3.org. If you want to get in on the monarchy conversation, you're welcome to email us your opinion. Lawrence and I always appreciate every connection that we have when it comes to our audience and our guests. And folks, if you have ideas of things you'd like us to talk about, we're always trying to really focus on what's happening within the Métis community, what's happening within the Indigenous communities. But Lawrence and I are also here to have some fun, make fun of each other, make fun of the learning and the experience that we have as we move forward. But again, Lawrence, I always appreciate it every week.
Yeah. And a wonderful conversation. Very hard hitting. We do want to get into these hard hitting topics. I think it's important, at least for discussion purposes. But we have a lot of things happening at the region. Might cover the history, Chief language. We're starting to do more stuff online. Look at social media. Look at how we relate to our younger people. Try to get them involved in the conversation. It's all pretty exciting.
And definitely the mental health aspect and the development aspects for youth, and our relationship with the elders, and our working men and women out there who are part of our Métis community. So, folks, thank you for taking your time to listen to the Squeaky Wheel. We always look forward to hearing from you, and keep the fire burning, folks. Make sure you send us any of your comments.